Hey everyone, it's been a couple of weeks since I've been live, but I wanted to come live today because I recorded an episode of an awesome podcast all the way back in March, and I wanted to let you know about it and introduce you to the host of the podcast. The podcast is called FOMO Sapiens, and the individual that I'm going to be speaking to in a second actually invented the term FOMO, right? So this is going to be a really fascinating conversation. I'm bringing on Patrick right live, and here he is. It's connecting. It's good to see you all coming in on live right now. Thank you for being here. And here he is, Patrick. It's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you. It's been a long time.
Literally, Patrick, I was just telling my community that we met in March, which was just before lockdown began. And I remember we recorded this incredible episode on your awesome podcast, FOMO Sapiens. So everyone who doesn't know Patrick, go ahead and follow him. Patrick J. McGinnis. He's the host of FOMO Sapiens and the inventor of the word FOMO, which we use everywhere, which not only made it into a dictionary, but became a cultural phenomenon that we discuss now in everyday language. And so if you haven't already, go and listen to our new podcast. Patrick's well known for being a venture capitalist, and his podcast interviews lots of different people from different backgrounds and walks of life. And our episode just launched his season 5, Patrick, I think I'm right. Congratulations on a new season.
I mean, I got to tell you something. When we recorded that episode, I knew it was special and I wanted to do something special with it. And so we created this double episode we just launched, and the feedback, it's been awesome, actually. I mean, it's sort of, it's a lot of work doing this stuff, right? But when you can put a message out there of positivity in a time like this, it just feels good.
Thank you, man. Yeah, no, thank you. And today I want my community to get to know a bit about you, because they're going to get to know a lot more about me in our 2-part interview, which was brilliant, by the way. I really enjoyed our conversation. I remember being able to go into lots of stuff that I hadn't shared before. So anyone who's listening right now, make sure you go subscribe to FOMO Sapiens and listen to the 2-part episode that just dropped today. But I want you to get to know Patrick a bit better. So Patrick, I have to ask you, because I wanted to ask you all these questions back in March and I didn't get to, because you were kindly interviewing me about my book. But I want to know all about the word FOMO, but more importantly, how it actually came to you, because I think that it summarizes so much of how much everyone feels, but you simplified it and synthesized it so clearly. Where did the idea come from?
So it's crazy, because the story I would have told you back in March has a lot more depth now because of everything we're living right now. So what happened was, I was living in New York City on 9/11, and that I lived, in a mile from where the Twin Towers were, and I experienced that up close, and that changed the way everybody looked at the world. We never, from that point onward, we asked ourselves, would life ever be normal again, right? And then shortly thereafter, I left New York and went to graduate school up in Boston at Harvard Business School. And when I got there, it was like an escape from reality. It was no more worrying about terrorism. It was just focusing on the fun of being a student and all the opportunities that existed. And this was a time before social media, if you can believe that. But even without social media, being at school was like living inside of Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter all at the same time. And so I felt constantly stressed because I wanted to do all of the things that I could do in this really choice-rich environment. And so even though I felt great about having these fun things I could do, I felt stressed, and I started to call that the fear of missing out. I shortened it to FOMO, and I wrote an article in our school newspaper way back in 2004. And I thought it was over. I was like, okay, this is kind of funny. What a weird time. I'm going to go graduate and live back in New York in a normal life. But the world caught up to me. And thanks to social media now, everybody's feeling the FOMO.
Yeah, well, when you wrote about it, and in 2004, by the way, that was the birth of Facebook, right? Officially. So that would have been around the same time.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg was living less than a mile from my apartment. And while I was inventing FOMO, he was inventing Facebook. I'd like to think mine was more impactful, but I don't know.
That's awesome. I love that. So I guess you would have walked past his window, seen the equation, the supposed equation on the wall. But tell us about how you think FOMO has evolved and been experienced over the last few months, because it's been interesting. On one part, I've heard a lot of people say things like, you know what, actually, I kind of feel like it's leveled the playing field. We're all back to square one. No one's missing out anymore because we're all starting over again. And, I don't feel that kind of cycle of, because we're all in the same position for the first time. But at the same time, our minds are so wired for FOMO that we'll find any gap to just creep through. Tell us how you've visualized it and used it over the past 6 months or 7 months now.
Yeah, listen, I think about this really deeply. And what's funny was the weekend that right after we did our interview, my mom was in town and my mom said, we need to go buy toilet paper right away. And I got to the store and there was no toilet paper. And I was like, Mom, FOMO, right? Like everybody's got FOMO and everybody was sort of feeling those feelings. And then we went inside our houses for the quarantine and we locked our doors. And for the first time in my memory, I did feel an absence of FOMO. Like you know what I did? I learned how to cook. I watched all the movies. You know, I did all these things that I'd wanted to do over the years. And for a couple of weeks, I actually thought like maybe FOMO is no longer a thing. But there's two things that happened that I think really fundamentally explain what's going on now. Number one is the one thing we brought with us into our quarantine was our cell phones. And cell phones and social media are the number one driver of FOMO. So in fact, we actually increased our dose of those things. If you look at your screen time, just shot up for a lot of us. Number two is that FOMO became less about that fun party or, you know, these sort of like day-to-day simple things and became much deeper. It's about spending time with family in the holidays. It's about the life you should have been leading. And so FOMO now, for me, when I feel it, you know, it's so much deeper than it was before.
Wow. 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 That's really interesting. I didn't think about it like that. Yeah, that's fascinating actually. FOMO's now become the life we should have been living a year ago.
Yeah.
The life we could have been living a year ago. Wow. So it's almost like backdated FOMO. It's like, wow. Okay.
No, it's heavy, right? I mean, it's heavy.
Yeah. When you think about it like that, I mean, I don't feel that way personally, but when you think about it like that, I can totally empathize with how that is very real, because now people are like, oh, we should have taken that trip. We could have done this, right? Like, yeah, that's really interesting. Tell us seeing as you invented the term and the phrase and just even started thinking about it in this way, what are the implications of FOMO? Like what's actually happening in the mind and how can we understand it better? Because I feel it's become a term that we kind of throw about a bit. And like you said, Patrick, you think about things very deeply and I like to do the same and I like dissecting things and understanding its mechanics. What are the implications of FOMO? What's actually happening in our minds or our brain when we're feeling FOMO?
First of all, I just want to let everybody know we are wired to feel FOMO. It's part of our DNA. If you think back to the earliest humans, they were very aware of what they had, what they didn't have, but needed to survive in the harsh realities of the time. So it's something that's a part of us. It's not a new thing. It's just been amped up by all of the information we get in. So that's just kind of the way things are. But what happens when we feel FOMO is two things are happening. First, we are feeling anxiety based on the perception that there's something better out there than what we're doing right now. So perception can be deception, but it causes us stress. The second thing that's happening is that we have this fear of being left out of a positive collective experience, you know, some sort of thing that everybody's doing but you. And so when you feel these things, especially this perception, what's really happening, and this gets back into your work, Jay, is that you're separating yourself from reality. You're living more and more inside your monkey mind instead of your monk mind. And and that's where the pathology is, when your disconnection from reality becomes so persistent that you become overwhelmed.
Yeah, I was reading that you've been meditating for 2 years now, I think it was. How has that helped your understanding of FOMO and your ability to be more connected? Like, what is meditation? I'm intrigued by as someone who's meditated for like, I've been meditating now for like around 16 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, seeing you've been meditating for 2 years, which by the way is an incredible amount of time. That's a lot of time to commit to a practice. What have you gained from it? And what have you learned from it?
Well, first of all, I want to note two kind of exciting things in my meditation practice. Number one is I just hit 365 days every day meditating, which thankful for that. And I also built, you can see it over there, a meditation area in my apartment, right? So that's cool. But what has it done for me? Listen, I created FOMO. Okay, if there anybody who's gonna, you know, be all over the place, a little maybe monkey mind, I'll admit it, it's me. And in fact, I constantly felt like I was overwhelmed as an entrepreneur. Like I felt that I would easily get angry or overreact to things, and I couldn't think dispassionately about things and assess them rationally, right? And what happened for me when I started meditating was that I found that I had a resilience to be able to look at things sort of in an objective way, not flip out and freak out, which was kind of my way of doing things before. But the most important thing for me, Jay, and it's so funny because I remember we talked about it. I got some advice from you on my own practice and like the gratitude part, you know, thinking about the things you're thankful for. And during the deepest dark depths of the quarantine, when frankly things weren't going particularly well for any of us, including myself, I could find a couple of things that I could feel good about in that day. And that changed the whole, it made it like sort of that I didn't lose it and that I was able to continue going. And I'm very thankful that I had that, because otherwise I think I would have had a much more difficult time making it through this period so far.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I really appreciate that. I loved our discussion on meditation and practices and ways of supporting each other, and how we could learn more from each other's practices and what you were up to too. And you wrote a whole book about FOMO, and particularly, by the way, for everyone who wants, the book is called FOMO, and it's a practical guide to working in a world with overwhelming choice. Now, that's what I wanted to touch on, Patrick, is that idea of living in a world with overwhelming choice. Now, I've seen the studies that talk about how choice actually makes us make bad decisions. How have you helped people, and how does your book help to guide people to make better decisions in this world? Because if you look at dating right now, so dating was something that was really interesting during the pandemic, because now you've got all this choice, but no way of actually meeting that person. When you look at the amount of things to watch, how many shows are available. I mean, the amount of times me and my wife have sat in front of our screen and just spent time trying to figure out what to watch, and know that an hour and a half has gone by and then we don't know what to watch and we don't watch anything. What are you meant to do in choice to make better decisions? How do we make better decisions?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an important topic, and I did a whole TED Talk on this called How to Make Faster Decisions. So everybody can check that out over at TED. But just to share some of you're absolutely right. So whether it's deciding who you're going to date and marry, or deciding what you're going to eat on Seamless or on Netflix, like we're overwhelmed with choice. Technology has given us, just buying shoelaces on Amazon, 2,000 types of white shoelaces. It's crazy. And so this is something I think a lot about. And there's a couple of things. The first thing is, when it comes to the small decisions, okay, so you can spend half an hour deciding whether you're going to go for a run today. And that becomes a great way of procrastinating from dealing with the important things, but it also becomes a way of basically, it's sort of like, it sort of takes over your life. And so what I do for the simple things is a methodology I developed when I was a college student, and it's called Ask the Watch. Basically, if I'm saying, okay, am I going to go for a run today? This side of the watch is yes, that side is no. I look down, see where the second hand is. It's decided. Done and dusted. And the thing is, I don't do that for important things, but when a decision is when there's a decision that I say to myself, I won't remember even thinking about this in 2 days, I ask the watch. The watch is always right. And so that's a big thing. For the bigger decisions in life, I mean, this is something I spend a lot of time on. It's a longer process, but fundamentally, the framework you need to keep in mind is this. When you're overwhelmed with choice, especially when your choices are particularly good, you are less, even if you make a better decision because you have somebody and you spent the time doing it, you are more likely to be unhappy because you are more likely to regret the road not taken. And so that you need to deploy a process to be thankful for the options you have, be grateful for them, but also recognize that not deciding is putting yourself in a prison of your own creation, and that you must, in order to move forward in your life, you must make decisions.
That's amazing. I love that insight. Thank you so much, Patra. I'm just reading out some of our comments here. Sarah says 365 days of meditation. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
A lot of people agreeing with what you're talking about. Everyone's saying, yes, I completely agree with you. Fear of missing out has made things more difficult during quarantine. Thank you for sharing that. Sarah just says, please notice me. I just bought your book. I love you. Sarah, thank you so much. We love you back and appreciate you. Oh, here we go. That is a great point. Thank you so much. Someone here says, Patrick, thank you for helping me understand that there are other people who feel the way I feel. Absolutely. That's a really interesting one, Patrick. You know, that feeling of, we feel such a sense of comfort knowing that other people experience what we experience. And we feel discomfort when people experience things we don't experience, right? Like, so fear of missing out. Let's really get into this, because this is really interesting and fascinating. So if you experience something and I don't, I can feel like I missed out, right?
Yeah.
But if you feel the same way I feel, I can feel a togetherness and a oneness that gives me a sense of comfort. Is that positive, or does that have its pitfalls as well?
I think it does. And I think actually FOMO is not all bad. You just hit on something so valuable. And I think finding the positive in something is one of the things that I think we both like to do, and everybody here likes to do. So let me tell you that the good thing about FOMO is, if you feel FOMO, especially as Jay sort of just pointed out, you see somebody doing something and you feel that FOMO, ask yourself, why am I feeling that? Is it, you know, sometimes I would feel jealous of somebody who did something I wanted to do because it was FOMO. And as I thought deeply about it, it was like, you know what? Why don't I try that thing? Why don't I try something new, open my mind? And so FOMO, if you know how to identify it and think about it like a monk, it can be an invitation to do something that you've never done before.
That's great. I love that, because we get so stuck in like labeling something as good or bad, and generally people are like, FOMO, oh no, I don't want to have that. What are some of the ways that you've seen, or your best practices that you've learned, you've seen others practice since inventing FOMO? What are some of the best things that you've experienced that you're like, these are the 3 or 4 things that have really helped me deal with FOMO effectively? You've given us Ask the Watch for making faster decisions. You've given us this question right now about making sure that, what am I really scared of missing out on? What are some of the best practices or principles you've used?
Yeah, so there's a couple of easy ones that everybody can do today. The first thing you have to do is never bring your phone into your bedroom, because and I think I know you don't do that, but it's, and you know, Arianna Huffington, maybe if you've seen her phone bed, I use that thing. So you plug in your phone, you put it in a little bed, and then you're done. You don't want to bring the phone in the room, because the minute you wake up at 4 in the morning and you check the internet and you check social media, you're not going to have a good night's sleep. So that's number one. Number two is thinking mindfully about how you engage with social networks, and having remembering that it's all perception based, all these feelings you're feeling. And so not only being critical about what you see, but being careful about what you put out into the world, so that you're not creating a bunch of problems for other people. And the final one is meditation. And why is that? Because as we talked about a bit earlier, when you feel FOMO, you are living in a fantasy world. You're living in a place that your mind has created, and you need to pull yourself back into reality and reconnect yourself to what is around, ground yourself. And so in doing that, I have this great interview with a neurobiologist who's also a Buddhist meditation practitioner. And he basically said, like, the number one tool that you can use is mindfulness. And so that has many forms, as you know, and anybody who's read Jay's wonderful book knows that there's different ways to do that. But that is sort of like the most powerful thing that I have found in my own life.
I love that. I remember last time we met, and we spoke about this briefly on the podcast too, but someone else had invented this term called JOMO. I don't know who it was, but the joy of missing out. And you were saying that there were some things about that were intriguing to you. You were curious about. Could you share some of those with us? Because I remember that part of our conversation, but we didn't dive into it enough either.
Yeah, so JOMO is very popular on social media, and it's sort of like, it's a great term. Obviously, we all want to feel JOMO, right? It sounds amazing. But here's where you need to be cautious. When somebody is talking about JOMO, what's really happening is they felt the need to stop and tell you about their JOMO. If they really felt JOMO, they would just feel it, and it wouldn't even be so it sort of signals that maybe you haven't done all the work you need to do. I think that's number one. Number two is it's a wonderful place to be. It's a destination, but you still need to take the journey. You need to do the work to get there. And so simply proclaiming that you have JOMO, while it feels good, doesn't necessarily get you to where you need to be. So that's what I caution people to think about. But obviously we can all feel good about it if we can get there.
When is it? Listening to you, and this is just opening up so many questions. I'm genuinely just in the moment now. I'm like, oh God, I want to know. I want to discuss this with someone. So this is great, Patrick. I love doing this with you, because it's nice to just kind of go back and forth in a
totally.
both enjoy being in. Tell me and by the way, everyone who's watching or listening to this right now, make sure you go listen to our full conversation on FOMO Sapiens podcast. That's Patrick's podcast. He interviewed me for a 2-part series, which is the launch of his season 5 on the FOMO Sapiens podcast. So please, please, please go and listen to it. If you want to hear more of us going back and forth, and especially me going into parts of my life that I haven't discussed so much before. But one of the things that you just made me think of is, when is it good or bad, or is it good or bad at all? And maybe I'm using the wrong language. When is it appropriate to seek validation for our feelings and emotions and our perspective? And when is it not beneficial? Because what you just said there is, often we're sharing, Jomo, and you're saying, actually, you know, if you really felt it right, then you wouldn't even need to get that validation. When is it healthy? And you know what? Actually, I want to use those words. I feel like sometimes we use the words good and bad, and it kind of is very judgmental. Whereas I think words like healthy and unhealthy, even more than positive and negative. I'm just trying to figure out how to word things better myself. But I really like the idea of, like, when is it healthy to ask for validation for how I feel, and when is it unhealthy?
That is such a good question. And the way that I think about that, because I think all of us in our lives are on this journey where in the beginning, we so much of what we value about ourselves requires external validation. Because like when you're a teenager, you know, there's all this pressure to conform. And then you find yourself over time, and hopefully you have a real true sense of who you are and what matters. And that's kind of where you want to go. And so I think the best way to sort of address your question, and I'd love to hear what you think, because I'm really curious how you view this, is the validation is powerful when you're curious and you're learning. And it's not helpful when you're judging. One expands you, one reduces you.
Wow. Say that again. Say that again. That was really powerful. Say that again, Patrick. I really like that.
Sure. So I think this validation, this process of seeking validation, serves you when you are in curious mind, when you're seeking to educate yourself, gather more data, and learn more deeply about who you are. I think it expands you. When it is simply you're judging yourself in the process, you diminish yourself, and so therefore it doesn't serve you.
I love that. I really, really like that. I think that's such a great principle to meditate on when we're validating, when we're looking for validation and in our thoughts. Because, yeah, we all need it. Just like you said, we're wired, as you said, for FOMO. We're wired for getting validation and having people agree with us and feeling a sense of security when people do. And I know for me, I think my thoughts on that, thinking about it out loud with you, is I focus to seek validation from those that are actually experienced in that field, as to everyone. And so if when I was writing my book, I was speaking to authors to understand what worked well for a book, or what's the right way to present this, or what's an interesting tool or framework that I could use. Whereas you don't want to ask everyone, because that's not how it works. And I think sometimes that's where we get lost, is that we seek validation over things that people aren't experts in, or people aren't experienced in. Even if they're not experts, not experienced in. And therefore they can't even give us the validation we want. So half the time we're all seeking emotional validation from our family and friends who are not experienced in giving emotional validation. And therefore we feel even emptier, right? So
yeah, I think that's very valuable advice. And I think it's like the idea of the false prophets that we encounter in life, where you meet somebody and you meet people, they're exciting and they know things you don't know, and you sort of give them your part of your sort of mental headspace. But if they're false prophets, they can lead you astray.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So everyone, I'm going to put Patrick's new website into the comments here. It's FOMOSapiens.com, right, Patrick?
That's right. Yeah, we just launched it.
It's a new website that Patrick has just launched today, FOMOSapiens.com. You can find our new podcast and everything about Patrick right there. So what I want all of you to do, whether you're watching this live or you're going to watch this on the replay, as I know most of you are, I want you to head over to the pinned link at the in the bottom of the comments. It's FOMOSapiens.com. I want you to listen to our podcast with Patrick. Go follow Patrick on Instagram. And yeah, go and listen to our conversation and let us know. Tag me and Patrick in when you listen. So tag me at Jay Shetty and Patrick J. McGinnis. Tag us both on your post because we want to see what you learned from the podcast and what you did well. But Patrick, I'm so happy I got to meet you before all of this. There were so many people I didn't get to meet, podcasts I didn't get to do, interviews I didn't get to do, but we got to meet. There was a reason for that. I'm grateful for it. I'm happy that we got to spend that quality time together before everything happened. And I thank you for doing what you do, for sharing it so wonderfully. And I hope that a lot of the people here will go listen to your TED Talk, go and grab a copy of your book, but most of all, go and check out FOMOSapiens.com. So, Patrick, is there anything you want to share that you haven't been able to share today? I'd love to hear it.
I just want to say thank you so much. I've really enjoyed following you during this period of time. And, you know, I had the advanced copy of this book, and for all, I'm sure all of you are reading it, but if you haven't read it, check it out. It's such a good book. I read a lot of books for my job, and this one, when it came in, I devoured it in one day. And congratulations on all the success, and just everybody check out the podcast FOMO Sapiens on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get it. But if you enjoyed this conversation, you know, check it out, and definitely reach out with your ideas. I love hearing from people. I love learning from everybody. There's so much going on out there. Everybody's learning something right now, so share it.
I love it. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for spreading your positivity, man. I love it. This was such a great conversation, and I'm glad we just got to go back and forth and think out loud. I encourage everyone, just like me and Patrick were today, just flow into a conversation with someone, like really listen and be curious. And I think that's such a big part of everything, is if you just listen and yes, you'll have such much more interesting conversations than if we think we need to know about fascinating things to talk about and say and hear. It's so much more fun to just be a learner and a student. So I encourage that from you. And again, thank you for today. Everyone go check out FOMOSapiens.com. And I'll see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Everybody vote.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Check it out.